So writing something like 2023 is the year of change, there has to be a pretty good reason to actually make such a sweeping statement. So why is 2023 so important for composting? Well, so let's go forward slightly rather than back. In 2024, peat-based compost or peat-based growing mediums are no longer going to be sold to the general public, to retail. Commercial growers can still use it. I understand that might be until 2028, but your everyday shop or local supplier will not be able to supply grow your own allotments, homes, peat-based compost anymore. Now that's for two reasons. It's the government law, which is the overriding factor, but the two reasons why the government are making this law is, first of all, of course, the destruction of habitats, very important habitats for various creatures, and more importantly, the second reason is every time peat is dug out of the ground, it releases carbon dioxide, and that's a major greenhouse gas. And the government is pledged to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions substantially over the next few years. So these two reasons, the destruction of habitat and the emission of CO2, means we're going to have to change our ways. And I'm going to cover some of the issues over the next few minutes. First of all, I'm going to draw your attention to two documents that I put down below in the links in the comments, which are two DEFRA, the Department of the Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs. They're two documents. One is a consultancy. They've asked about 5,000 to 6,000 people, random people, about peat and whether it should be banned and such and so forth. And the answers are all overwhelmingly in support of a complete ban. And the second one is a very substantial document full of details and facts and figures that I won't bother going into, but they do highlight that all of the changes that and the costs to companies if and when peat is banned. And again, remember that peat will be banned for use in agriculture in the UK in two stages. 2024, we are guessing, will be the ban of retail peat, and 2028 will be the end of commercial use of peat in the UK. So why is peat so important? Now, I am a real avid viewer of YouTube videos for allotments and grow your own, and probably you are too as you're watching me. And at least three of them have, that I watch, which are major names. I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to judge them either. People can use whatever they like to fulfill what they want to do. I personally don't use peat-based compost, and I wouldn't, being a little bit of an environmentalist, but I don't judge others. So why is peat so important? Well, peat has three major assets, let's say, to making it an ideal grow medium. The first is it's full of minerals and nutrients for your plants. It's broken down organic material after all. So yeah, it's really going to give your plants a good boost, like a fertilizer. The second is that because of its nature, it comes from peat bogs after all, it's a great water retainer. It's once you, for instance, my soil and my allotment is very fine. If I water, not only does the actual water run straight through and disappear without actually feeding the plants very much, but it also washes away the nutrients and minerals in the ground as well. So I'm going to need to mulch with compost and wood, leaf mould and such like in order to make it a lot healthier for my plants. Well, that's what compost can, peat-based compost can actually help with. It can help retain that moisture, either as a growing medium or as a mulch, and it really improves soil condition. And the third one is along the same lines. It is a great oxygenator as well. Inside that peat is a considerable amount of trapped oxygen, which will also help your plants actually grow. So these three assets, let's say, for peat really are almost unique amongst various other natural, if you like, growing mediums. For instance, compost, normal compost, might have very good minerals and nutrients for your plants, but it might not, depending on its composition, it might not have the other two, the water retention and so on and so forth. So usually people will make a mixture of different mediums in order to get a good compost to match peat. For instance, cocoa coir is a very good water retainer, and leaf mould much the same. However, they don't contain nutrients, so that they may have to be mixed with your normal made compost in order to get that same assets, as we've decided to call them, as peat. So what can replace peat if it's no longer going to be sold? Well, we've mentioned obviously some of the alternatives for water retention, such as leaf mould or cocoa coir, and your own compost, of course. But where else are you going to get those minerals and nutrients? Well, manure. Manure is one of the most likely substitutes for the actual added value that of a fertilising compost, so to speak. Either horse manure or cow manure. Of course, as a vegan, I won't use anything from the meat industry, so that is basically chicken manure or cow manure, but I certainly will use horse manure, as in my area horses are pets. Now, I love my pussycat, and I'm sure that horse owners treat their pets with as much affection as I do. So can you actually just grab a load of horse manure and throw it on? Well, no. If you want to actually make it as good as peat, then you have to mix it with, yeah, I'm talking about you. You have to actually mix it with other materials in order to give it that same assets, if you like, that peat as a growing medium actually contains. But more on that in a second. So why is 2023 so important? Well, these things don't just happen. They take time to happen. And these things I mean by compost and horse manure. So peat can take hundreds of years to actually, or even longer, I'm not an expert, to actually be created. Compost, we're much more fortunate, it only takes a year or two to actually break down and provide us with, from the original vegetable material, green waste from the allotment or house, only takes a couple of years. And in fact, you can probably get a reasonable mulch after just one. Horse manure, much the same. You can't use it raw. There's too much ammonia in the urine, and it can burn plants. So it needs a good bit of time to break down and become a good compost. So a year to make it a reasonable compost, 2 years to make it an excellent one. And again, it will probably be needed, if you want to use it, for instance, as a seed or potting on compost, you'll probably need to actually put extra things in it. Now, I have seen YouTube challenges where people have actually grown potatoes purely in horse poo, and they got reasonable results, but that's really an exception, and it was good rotted down materials. It wasn't just fresh out the pony. So that's why 2023 is so important. It's because if you're going to stop using peat, you need to actually start composting now in order to replace it. I mean, the alternative is that you buy compost from the stores, and trust me, we don't know what's going to happen. Let me explain why. So there's lots of videos on YouTube about making your own compost from various content makers. All of them pretty much say the same thing. You take your own household waste from the kitchen, your cuttings and scrapings, eggshells and things like that. You mix it with your green waste, your grass cuttings, your hedge trimmings. You can mix it with various woody materials, carbon-based materials such as cardboard, sawdust, wood chips, and mix them all together, and in a year or 2 years time you'll get compost that you can use for various general purposes, or even if it's a good compost, you can use it for potting on compost or making your own sowing composts and so on and so forth. But you have to start now. You have to start in 2023 in order for 2024, and I don't know when it's going to happen in 2024. Parliament can go until January 2025, after which there has to be a compulsory general election. But if this is one of the pledges on of the current government to get this act through, then it has to be done sometime probably before then. So anytime in 2024 it will become an act of parliament, and they may turn around and say, well, you know, it has to be by 2025. I don't know. So I'm not really sure of when any law will come into way to stop peat-based composts being sold. However, until then, there are a growing number of retailers who are no longer going to be stocking peat-based compost. The Co-op in the UK and B&Q in the UK have already stopped selling it, and other retailers are also following suit, making pledges. So it may be that the actual peat-based composts may be harder and harder to get hold of. So let me give you a worst case scenario. So in 2024, all peat-based composts stop. According to DEFRA, which is the Department for the Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs, about 30% of composts currently sold are peat-based. Now, that doesn't mean to say 30% of us are buying compost. It could be 70% of us are buying a mixture of composts, some containing peat, some not. But 30% of all peat-based, of all composts are peat-based at the moment. So the industry is going to have to find a third more compost in order to fulfil that gap. Now, these are all obviously not definitive numbers. It's just giving an indication of how much compost is being sold. There is more information in the links from the DEFRA reports that I've linked below. So where's that compost going to come from? Now, if you currently are one of the really lucky people in the world and have some local farmer or stables deliver lots of manure free of charge to your allotment site, simply because they want to get rid of it and they don't want it sort of sitting around in their farmyard, then obviously you are extremely lucky. However, that product, that manure, is suddenly going to become very valuable. I mean, obviously, if you can't go and dig peat out of the ground, where else are you going to get some mineral and nutrient-rich medium to actually sell onto the public? Well, of course, manure is going to be worth money to people, and it could be your local farmers, especially if they're organic based. Remember that organic manure won't have any risk of contamination from weed killers and stuff. Then the manures that they are producing, companies might want to buy them in order to start packaging them and selling them on in the shops. We already can buy well-rotted composts, so it's not beyond the stretch of the imagination that if peat-based composts are going to be phased out, the manure-based composts might be their obvious replacements, and we're suddenly not going to get Hello, what's the matter? You came to see me. We're suddenly not going to get 30% more. Put your bum away. We're suddenly not going to get 30% more manure suddenly being created. It's going to be the same quantity, it's just going to have to be shared amongst retailers and compost manufacturers and such like. Also, normal composts which don't contain peat are suddenly going to be more in demand. Now it could be that the companies that provide it currently can actually just fulfill the gap between what was sold as peat-based composts and what is now going to have to be sold as non-peat-based compost. And it could be that there is enough compost out there to fulfill that. If there isn't, then it could be that firstly, non-peat-based compost will be in short supply until that gap is met and the increase is actually provided for. And if that happens, secondly, the cost will go up. If there's a shortage of a product, its price increases. It's natural retail economics. That makes it even more important than if you are one of these people that prefer to buy composts, you actually think about the future and either maybe stock up in 2024 for the following year, or you actually start producing your own in 2023. So that's why I'm actually saying 2023, vital time to actually get your composting, leaf mulching, manure sorting underway. So good luck with that, and let me know in the comments below if you agree, if you think there's going to be any differences between what I've explained and reality. Again, I'm no expert on economics, I'm no expert on the industries. So if you are and you have an insight, please share it with us so I know what my strategy will be and I can adapt accordingly. Have fun composting, everybody. Bye bye.